Now then guys, how's it going? Many of you have been asking me for a while now if I can create a full fat processing tutorial series, and that is exactly what I've got for you today. So this is going to be the first part in a multi-part series where we're going to take a look at processing different types of objects from start to finish. I'll be providing data for you, by the way, and we're going to be using all the best possible processing tools on the market. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to need to have installed, and if you want to follow along exactly with the data that I'm working on and the same tool set, it will be provided for you in the description box down below. I've got it hosted on my Google Drive. Once you've got that, you should have something that looks like this in a zipped folder. Just take both of those out, load them into your PixInsight. If your icons don't appear, right click and arrange icons, and they should come onto your main window. So we're going to be using for this, you're going to have to make sure that these are all installed and ready to go. BlurXTerminator, NoiseXTerminator, StarXTerminator, all pretty simple installs, but they are paid software from Russell Chrome and Astro. They are the best bits of software, by the way, that I've ever used, and I ain't just saying that. They've changed the game for me. If you're interested in buying those and you want to throw some support my way, by the way, do have affiliate links down below. Huge thanks to everybody who's already used those. You guys keep me going every month. We're going to be taking a look at generalized hyperbolic stretch. I have a video in the description box down below showing you how to install that one. Again, another very simple one. And also, you're going to need GradientXpert integrated with your PixInsight. Once you've got all of those, ideally, you'd be using my same processing tool set as I've got over here, which just includes some tools from PixInsight itself, natively included. A couple of little rescreening tools that I've got over here. You can use whatever you want for rescreening. If you have other tools from other people, that's absolutely fine. These are nothing special. And also a few different sets of mask generating tools from my friend Bill Blanchard. That's about it. Sorry about the huge introduction. It's just so much to cover with this being, you know, a kind of a full fat kind of processing tutorial. Now, loading your file, you're going to start with a very drab grey looking file like this. If you just open up the SDF window and click the little nuke icon, we can get a auto kind of screen stretch on that. This is not affecting the underlying data in any way whatsoever. It's just a visibility stretch. And as you can see, it's a little bit green tinged due to light pollution from my location. This is broadband data, by the way, unfiltered from Bortle 7. Taken with a one-shot color camera and a RASA 11, and there is problems with it, of course, and I think this is important that we portray data with problems because almost everybody's data has issues. This, as you can see, really super common. Stacking artifacts in the corners. We're going to absolutely have to make sure that they are all gone before we move on, as that will really start to trip up different phases of processing if it's registering these pure black values, let's say, from these corners. It'll skew things. So the first thing I want to do is use dynamic crop on this window, and I'm just going to take it from the corners and get rid of any and all stacking artifacts, because it's not just the black areas that we're worried about. Those corner edges also are kind of very low signal to noise ratio, and that too will throw things off. So we just want the common area of everything if possible. Now, it's up to you at this point if you want to turn this around to the absolute correct orientation. If you do, I'm just going to use fast rotation and apply a vertical mirror. And now for the next phase of processing, I think I'm going to run this through GradientXpert first and foremost. Now, if you want to take a look at the data, by the way, first with an unlinked stretch as well, you can kind of get another feel what's hidden in there. A little bit more of them blacks and kind of greeny bluey tones come through with that unlinked stretch. But I'm going to stick with a linked SDF preview for this and start to process. So I'm going to go to Scripts, Toolbox, GradientXpert, open it up and make sure the right window is selected, and it is. I'm just going to hit Go, and we're going to go with it all at defaults. Alright then, so GradientXpert is now finished, and it's kind of put it back into an unlinked stretch phase. So if I just hit SDF once again with that linked mode selected, you can now get a better feel for that underlying data, and GradientXpert really has done, you know, a tremendous job at getting rid of all of those gradients. I processed this data a while back actually, before I got GradientXpert, and I did not get it this flat. So top marks. That software is fantastic. Now the next thing I'm going to want to do is apply BlurXTerminator to this. As you can see, the stars are quite large in this field of view. That raster is very bright. It burns out stars quickly, or at the very least makes them very large quickly. As you can see, the stars in some of the corners, when, you know, admittedly very zoomed in, aren't quite perfect. So the bottom right there, there's some slight radial elongation. Top right, the same sort of thing, ever so slightly. Top left, as you can see, not quite completely perfect. But when we apply BlurXTerminator, I'm just going to go ahead and apply this, by the way, all at defaults. And I don't do this just because I'm lazy. That is part of it. But it's quite simply because I've tried generating manually a PSF before and trying to do it as best as I possibly can. And I just can't see much of a difference, to be honest, to warrant all the extra effort in terms of generating a PSF yourself versus just letting the software do its thing. It always does a fantastic job for me. I'm not going to say that that's a rule that you should follow. You should absolutely experiment for yourself. But for me, I just trust the process. Now, if we just take a look at the results from BlurXTerminator in this bottom corner where we had quite bad stars. Undo and redo. You can see they're now super duper tight and absolutely perfectly round once again. So undo, you see there's that kind of radial elongation going on, and redo. It's now as tight in those corners as it is in, let's say, you know, the center field. It's unbelievable. And not to mention just, you know, it's not just the stars getting sharpened up, but the details too in an image, like this kind of flocculent, cloudy detail inside here also becomes deconvolved. It just, I don't want to process without this software. I'll just put it that way. I'm sure if you try it out yourselves, whether you try the free trial or whatever, or if you have it already, you probably know what I'm talking about. There's no going back once you've got used to this thing. Next up, anyway, without too much ado, NoiseXTerminator is going to be the next phase for me. Now, before I apply this, quickly just should tell you about it a little bit. It's quite strong at its default setting of 0.9. It can go a little bit stronger if you turn it up to a 1.0 value, let's say, but it can also be set to quite a bit weaker. Feel free to apply this, by the way, in multiple steps if you wish. So you could do a very nice denoise if you apply it first, let's say at half strength, and then a little bit stronger, or a strong first pass and a weaker second pass. Depends on your data as to what's going to work best for it. But for me and this tutorial, generally, when I'm processing my images, I will take a look at the data visually at a 1:1 or a 2:1 stretch or so. And if it looks quite badly mottled, like this one is, around a 0.75, 0.80 or something stretch, denoise value is what I'm going to aim for, and that should do a great job of denoising the whole thing. Once it's finished processing this, we can take a look, and if we want to pass it again, like I said, by all means, feel free to do so, but it looks like it's done it in one for me. I don't like it when images go too smooth. They kind of begin to look a bit pastel and cartoonish, whereas this it kind of retains a nice natural element to it, I think. So, there you have it. It's now denoised. It's GradientXTerminated. It's BlurXTerminated. The last thing we want to exterminate are these stars. Now, we don't want to get rid of them completely. We just want to remove them from the image to be able to put them back in later. So make sure you tick Generate Star Image, as without that, just going to get rid of the stars and keep rid of the stars. You won't have any way to put them back in. And make sure you tick Unscreen on the stars. Going to go ahead, let this run, and we'll pick up in a moment. Okie dokie, that's finished. Now you can see we've got two separate images. We'll just close down StarXTerminator there. We've got the stars image and the quite beautiful, I think, Starless image already. Now the next phase for me is going to be taking these into the non-linear phase of processing. So I'm first of all going to select the Starless image. I'm going to unstretch the whole thing so I don't forget to do so later. And with that window selected, I'm now going to open GHS, Generalized Hyperbolic Stretch. going to create preview window. I'm going to change transformation type to linear. And the first thing that I'm going to do is try and adjust this black point, because as you can see, the background of the image is pretty much PixInsight gray as it happens. So I'm going to take this left-hand pip on the histogram graph window right there and start dragging it across towards the base of this histogram spike right here. Hopefully you can see, if I just make this window a little bit larger, what I'm talking about. So I'm going to drag our black point up towards it. Now, you want to be careful at this point because you could ruin your image. If you go too far like that, you can see these low clip values. It starts to become very severely clipped with just a very small mouse movement. So you want to be clipping nothing at all, ideally at this stage. So go ahead and apply at that. Reset the whole tool. And now with it on generalized hyperbolic mode, I'm just going to select by clicking on that histogram spike, just not too accurately right now, just as long as we're in the ballpark. Now when we hit the zoom tool, it's going to make it visible for us in the right spot. I'm going to go up to about 20 or so for visibility's sake. We'll take a quick look at what we're actually working with right here. So you can see this kind of histogram is quite a good visual histogram. It demonstrates the areas in the image which contain those red pixel values. The teal right there, that's the intersection. If you can see, very slim at the top. The green spike and the blue spike, they are separate, but there's a large kind of overlap section. That's the teal part. And then the overlap of all of them is this gray segment right here. So I want to select my symmetry point to be smack in the middle, roughly, of this very broad part, if you will, at the bottom of the gray segment in particular. I'm going to send that to the symmetry point. Just drag this slightly out of the way for visibility's sake. And now I'm going to wind up the stretch factor. Just keeping my eye on the left-hand window. I'm not worried about what's going on the right now. And just keep steadily bringing it up until everything starts to become visible in the image. Now you can see we can go too far with this and overcook those bright details, such as over in the core right there. That's starting to get ruined. So we don't want to do that. Ideally, take it up to that point and then scale it back so you can see what it would look like when it's gone wrong, and then you know what you're looking for in those regions. You can prevent it going wrong in the first place. So around a 0.45 value, 4.5 rather, to me looks good for this first stretch. You can, if you wish, at this point stretch a little bit further by first adjusting your local intensity over to the right slightly. So if you go too far, you're going to mute the whole image again, so watch out for that. But just a touch is acceptable. A little bit like that. We're not kind of losing any dynamic visibility in this image. But now we've done that, we've brought back those highlights ever so slightly. We can now increase the stretch factor again, just another little step. So I'm going to apply at that, reset the whole tool once again, and now we're going to set for a final time our black point once again. So these regions, particularly around this bit of dark nebulosity right here, they're nowhere near black, right? And they should be. So I'm going to reset this view. And now we're going to use, once again, linear mode. And I'm going to drag across that slider, being careful not to start nipping into that low clip value. If you just do it on purpose for you a second. Now I'm clipping quite a few pixels at the low end. These ones right here, you can kind of plainly see. Anywhere that's already close to black suddenly becomes clipped black. And that's, you know, there's unrecoverable data in there, and it's just damage that we can avoid. So, don't do it. It's quite simple. We can bring it up and clip just a few pixels, no problem at all. You won't really do any visible damage to your image. That looks pretty good. So that's our black point now set. And at this point, you can go ahead, if you wish, and do one more small stretch on GHS. Now, at this point, I wouldn't use the broadest part of the grey kind of intersection. I would tend to use the leading foot somewhere quite far out actually as my new symmetry point for this secondary stretch. This is one way you can really kind of muck it up very easy, to be honest with you. So I'm going to want to apply just a little stretch value to this. So you can see if we take it too far, image is ruined. Just a little, it can stand it. And now if you take the local intensity backwards, you can generally go just a little bit step further again. It's a balancing act. But the image is starting to look pretty dramatic at this point. I may have gone a little bit too far there, but it's nothing drastic, I would say. So I'm going to stick with it for this, and I'm just going to advise that if you muck this up 10 times in a row, don't worry, because I've been there and done that, and I will do it some more. It's all part of the process. You will eventually land on one that you like. Go with that one. Don't worry too much about getting it perfect first time, because it just rarely happens. Now, there are some rules that we can follow when stretching these stars, however, to try and get that right the first time. So I'm going to select now the stars window. Once again with GHS now open, I'm going to create a new preview. And just looking at the image, I want to select a nice dense area of stars that also contains, ideally, some of the very brightest stars in the image. So this region right there looks like a great candidate. I'm going to click to draw a little preview window over that region, so it's not too huge. And now just using stretch factor alone at this point, I'm going to go ahead and make sure you remember, by the way, as I nearly forgot, to reset your STF before you start this stretching process. I'm going to start to bring across the stretch factor just nice and steady. Now, if you go too far with this, it's going to look terrible, but more than that, we're going to do kind of irreparable damage to our image in that we lose a lot of visual information that we can tell about these stars. You know which ones are brighter than others, for example. They all look equally bright. They're kind of all just burned out in the core. The only differentiating factor between them now is just size, and that's about it. We want more than that. So if we bring it up steadily, you can start to see the faintest background stars are becoming nicely visible, but not burned out like that. And at that point, when you've just got those faintest stars visible, and you can easily differentiate between these stars in terms of brightness, color, you know what I mean? I'd say you're at the right level of stretch. It is, once again, a bit of a balancing act, and you will get a feel for it over time. It is just a practice thing. But let's say if I zoom in on this little area right down here and just talk about it once more. So if I overstretch it, you know, you can't tell which of these is brighter. With it understretched, things are barely visible. But with it just about right, there again, 0.45 or so, you can see this star is brighter than this star's red, this star's much dimmer than all of them. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of interest actually being made visible now in that shot. Now I'm going to go and create a new preview around the very brightest stars for the purpose of setting the local intensity before applying this stretch. Now you can see these brighter stars have become completely blown out, and we can recover that a little bit. So if we up the local intensity, you can see we're now starting to get to the point where you can almost see the core of those stars once again. If you go too far, again, you're going to skew things and it's going to ruin the whole look of those stars. They're going to look fake. But if you get it just around about the point where the brightest edge of that star, the kind of flared edge, is just bleeding into the halo, if you will, in this case, it's going to look very natural. And the star size itself of those saturated stars is actually not going to increase really at all. That's why I would classify in this case as just about a perfect stretch. Make sure you don't apply it twice, otherwise you'll be dealing with that. But that's what I'd call now done. That's a nicely stretched, you know, set of stars. Our actual starless image is looking good. You may, in some cases, wish to spot target certain regions. So let's say these kind of bluish regions right here, maybe you want to bring those up a bit. I actually don't for this image, but I am going to show you just how to do it anyway. So I'm going to create a clone by dragging one out from the header right there. Now this cloned image, we're going to sacrifice it in order to create a mask. So to do that, I'm going to open curves. And with that clone selected, the color that I want to work on is the curve that I'm going to work on. So in this case, blue. I'm going to bring up the mid. Get those regions really popping out. It doesn't have to look pretty. Then I'm going to bring down the shadow end. Get rid of the blue from everywhere that I don't want it. The last thing I want is to try and make a mask when the image looks like this, because it's going to just be a big washed out mask, right? Unusable. What I want is to try and accurately target the region that I actually want. So that should work pretty well. I'm going to try and seal the deal by adding a little bit of saturation. So now we should get a mask just on this kind of region right here. If I hit apply on that, this is now prepared. And now using blue mask in this case, you can see we've got that region. We've isolated it. We can go ahead, close down that disgusting looking clone, and we can blur this mask a little bit. I always advise, if you can, blur your masks just a touch, because when you use them, then you're going to have softer transitions between different color areas rather than a rough, jagged transitional area that's not going to look any good at all. Going to open up curves, and now I'm going to spot add that color back in. So blue once again, and this time we can just boost it up just a little bit. Now in this case it's going a little bit purpley blue, so I want to add a touch of green too to bring it back to a more natural kind of color, and that almost looks kind of pearlescent. I quite like it anyway. For something I'd not intended to do other than for demonstration, it's turned out alright. So we're going to go ahead, close down now that blue mask. We're done with it completely. And the last phase really is going to be touch-ups. So you could at this point, if you wish, maybe add a very small S-curve over the whole kind of image, all values in it, using the RGBK. So that'd look something like this. Just very generally speaking, it is adding to the image. I think I'd probably, in this image's case, maybe not bother, but I will do it just for demonstration's sake. You could also, perhaps at this case, run it through utilities and dark structure enhance. Go ahead and hit OK on that. I just like to run things defaults where possible and then mess with them if things go wrong. Let's see how this turns out. That just turned out pretty perfect, it looks like. If I just undo it a second and redo, yeah, it has enhanced those dark structures, as the name implies. So now I think at this point, I am kind of happy with this image. You could always pass it through a little bit more denoising if you wished. Now it's been quite severely stretched, but I'm just going to go ahead and apply the stars back in and then decide. So Starless over the Starless image. At this point, use whatever you want to screen your stars back in. Stars over the stars image, and rescreen over any of them. Now we have quite a pretty finished image, I would say. I like the look of it. There is a little bit of residual noise added in there, but nothing that looks awful, It looks quite natural, I'd say. You wanted to get rid of it, that's what NoiseXTerminator is there for, I think a week pass 0.5 or so is going to get rid of all of that really for us. Just let it run, and yeah, sure enough, it's tidied it up considerably, and that looks really rather nice, I would say. I hope you guys are happy with that as a final run through. The key to any of this, I would say, is just repetition. Run through it a few times, and I almost guarantee that your 5th attempt, you're going to like it more than your 1st attempt, and that's simply because you're just getting to grips with things more and more and more over time, and it will continue to happen. Do you know what I mean? I still feel like I'm getting my eye tuned in more for PixInsight image processing every single time I process an image. So that bodes well, I guess, for the future. Hopefully I'll keep getting better. Hopefully we all will. Anyway, that's about it from me. I'd just like to say, as always, huge thanks to everybody who gives your support in all the ways that you give it, through Patreon, YouTube memberships, direct donations even, people using affiliate links like the affiliate links we talked about for the Exterminator tools. Appreciate you all, guys. I really, really do, and I couldn't do this kind of thing without your support, so thank you. I'm going to leave it there. I'm accepting ideas, if you have them, for the next tutorial that you'd like to see. Whatever seems really popular, we'll go for, and we'll do that. But otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Look after yourselves, and clear skies.